Hi, my friends. So here we go to the continuation of our lectures, and I think that in this session you will see how much you have learned already, right? So you remember we left our story with the Minoans, and one of the most important things about the Minoans, and one of the reasons we know so little about the Minoans, right? Remember, was that we have not deciphered their script yet, yeah, which was the linear A script. Remember, right, my friends? So okay, so and here is an example of the Phaistos disk, right, on which these Minoan sort of linear A characters have been actually printed, right? So okay, so wait, but we're going to leave Minoans a little bit and go to a region that becomes closely connected to the Minoans and Crete, right? And that is the region that is called Mycenae, yeah, Mycenae, and it is part of the Greek cultural and regional background, right? I mean, Mycenae is part of Greece, right? And the city of Mycenae, in Mycenae, as we will see, is the capital of the sort of Mycenaean cultures. But one of the things that I want you to remember, right, is that the the Minoan culture, right? One of the significant things about the Minoan culture was that they were traders, remember, and they had established trade routes. And one of the regions with which they traded was Mycenae, right? And Mycenae, therefore, besides Anatolia and besides Egypt, right? Remember, Crete itself did not have that much sort of primary resources. Neither did Mycenae, nor did the Greeks. Incidentally, we will talk about them later. But okay, so we are going to the Mycenaean Greeks, and they come into the picture, right? Once the Minoan civilization is goes basically out of the picture by 1500 BCE, right? Then comes the Mycenaean culture. The height of this culture is from the 1400 BCE to 1100 BCE. In other words, this culture is taking place. Also, the growth of this culture is in the second millennium, right? Like all the other empires that we've been dealing with now for the second millennium, right? And here you see that there are other palaces. The squares that you see are the other palaces of Mycenaeans, right? You see where Athens is, you see where Pylos is very, very important. You see where Mycenae itself is. There is a Messina here, not to be confused with the Mycenae, right? With Mycenae, right? What Mycenaeans took over is shown in I mean the range, the extent of Mycenaean culture and sort of geographical sort of connections is reflected in pink in the map that you see, right? So all of the Ionian islands, right, here, right, and the Aegean islands, right, and mainland Greece, right? This was the sphere of influence of the Mycenaean culture, so to speak, right, my friends? So one of the things that I want you to pay attention to here is also, again, remember the connections of Mycenaeans, right, with Western Anatolia, right, with Western Anatolia, because that is an important connection, right? And we will get to it again, right? Now, the so this is a sort of depiction of Mycenaean Greece, right? I want you to see that there are different regions, right, to it. The Messina that I was talking about, right, is here, and this is the city of Pylos. This is the region itself is Laconia, right? And the capital is Menalion, right? And so on. And this is Mycenae, the capital of Mycenae itself, right? The region of Arcadia. I want you to pay attention that here, for instance, Athens is in the region of Attica. There is the region of Boeotia, right? And so on and so forth. You will, when you're discussing Greek sort of culture, right? We are dealing with sort of different populations, as we will see, that have come and settled in different parts of Greece, right? Indo-Europeans, right? They're Indo-Europeans. And we will see why they are Indo-Europeans, right? So this is a depiction of Mycenaean Greeks, right? The confirmed states of Mycenae in these colors, right? This is possible state, right? And I don't see the yellow. I mean, I don't know what it refers to. Oh, unless it's this one. Yes, it's this one, right? Palatial centers, right? We had seen. Then these, the sort of round, white centers that you see are important citadels or settlements, and the dots that you see are other Mycenaean settlements, my friends, right? So we are now, right, the civilization. Remember, with the Minoans already, we were talking about the civilization of Western Asia, right, otherwise known as Middle East, which we will not call it by that name anymore because we're smarter than that, right? The civilization of Western Asia is moving west, right? You see, all the accumulated cultural traditions, scientific traditions, libraries, innovations, engineering feats, and whatever we have been talking about, right? Bureaucracies and notions of kingship, various notions of kingship, right? This world, this part of the world, which was not partaking in what we've been discussing so far, begins to be sort of engaged with the rest of Western Asia, right? And of course, what you will see in your readings is that we are talking in European terms already, right? They're talking about we're talking about European terms already when we're talking about the Mycenaeans, and even I mean some would stretch it to even the Minoans, right? Talk about co-opting culture, right? So anyway, and now we are entering, we are told by the 19th century sort of historians and the traditions that they have bequeathed on us, right, that we are entering Europe. Okay, and you see, this is the regions that I want that I was talking about, right? Mycenae, Attica, Boeotia, Argolet, Laconia, Arcadia, Messenia, right? Messenia, right? So I want you when you listen to this lecture, my friends, I want you to stop your videos here, right, and pay attention and figure out where all of these various parts are located in the Peloponnesia and in mainland Greece. And we'll talk about Peloponnesia in a second, right? We already have been talking about Peloponnesia, but we don't know it. But now we know it because we are now even smarter, right? Now, Peloponnesia, right, is where the cultural tradition of the cultural tradition of the Mycenaeans, right, was sort of centered on, right? This was where Mycenae was, right? This is the Peloponnesian sort of peninsula that is connected to the mainland. You see through Attica, right? And it is here that Athens is, and it is here that Sparta is, right? Sparta, and we will come to hear about Sparta soon as well, right? So, but in general, right? I want you to pay attention, right? Here is Crete, right? The Cyclades, right? And Dodecanese, right? The North Asian, Western Thrace, right? Which connects to Anatolia, right? This is Anatolia, and here are the straits, right? Yeah, Bosphorus and Dardanelles, right, respectively. And then I want you to come back west and you look at it and you see that here is your Peloponnesian Peninsula, right? And then Attica, very important region of Greece, right? Central Greece here, then Thessaly, and then we will know about Macedonia because Alexander, and of course, he's the great, right? Because he's Greek. Well, actually, he's Macedonian, right? And so on and so forth. So we are now coming to the parts of Eastern Mediterranean lands, right? Sort of which protrude into the Mediterranean itself, right? So we are talking about a cultural tradition, right, that is surrounded by water, right? Surrounded by water, and water has always been a connective, right? A connective sort of source for us, not a disconnecting source, right? So we can be sure that from the Minoans onwards, we are dealing with cultures which have a strong naval traditions, from Minoans to the Mycenaeans and then to the Greeks themselves, right? And here is the way Peloponnesia and mainland Greece, right? Or this is Peloponnesia, right? And this is mainland Greece, Athens, and now here we have a sort of enlargement of Peloponnesia, and you see here is Sparta, my friends, to the east of Messina. I'm sorry, to the east of Messina is Sparta, and the reason that there is a reason that I keep sort of emphasizing Sparta, right? And there's a reason for it, right? And where Peloponnnesia is connected to the mainland, my friends, is through the bridge of Corinth, right? So to speak, right? Through the connection of the Corinth, right? Okay, so yes, again, here is your map of the Asian world, right, my friends, right? You see this thing, you should not be confused. This is the region of Ionia, but this is the Ionian Sea between Greece and what is to the west of it, namely Italy, right, is the Ionian Sea, right? And there are a number of things that we want to pay attention to, right? Here is the city of Troy, right? Um, just as well to know these things. Uh, Here is Thermopylae, right? I'm maybe mispronouncing that. I will check on my pronunciation next time, my friends. Okay, Macedonia, right? I want you to pay attention. Yeah, Byzantium here, right? And I want you to see this part of the world as well. I want you to absorb this part of the world into your consciousness as well. This is the island of Rhodes, which is very, very important. And we will talk about it later on when we talk about the Romans, I think. Anyways, so we know that the dynamic, we don't know about the dynamic of the relationship between the Minoans and the Mycenaeans, right? It is debatable, right? But what we know is the Minoans were clearly much more sophisticated, right? And culturally they probably dominated their Greek neighbors, right? And the story that we remembered, right, from the Minoans, right, of the Greek king Theseus, right, being sent to Crete, right, to free the Athenians, right, from the heavy tribute that it was imposed by them by the king, Minoan king, King Minos. Remember, the only king that we know of, King Minos in Minoa, right? And here we have the story that by now we are familiar with, right? Theseus, the mythical founder and king of Athens, and the Minoan Minotaur, right? And that is defeated by him, right? And here again, one thing that I want you to pay attention is the spread of Mycenaean palaces, right? And one of the things that was characteristic of them was that there was a uniformity to them, right? Or in all the other places, in Thebes, in Athens, in Pylo and whatnot, where you see palaces, they resembled the one in Mycenae itself, right? Architecturally, in terms of their artistic taste, in terms of their technologies that they use for building materials, and so on and so forth, right? Okay, so what is the story, right? I mean, you remember that we were talking about the migration of the Indo-Europeans. You remember that, 4000 BCE, sort of somewhere in Caucasia or north of the Black Sea, right? They start spreading, right? They come into Anatolia and they become Hittites, right? They come again into Mesopotamia and they become the Mitanni in northern Mesopotamia, right? Well, part of them go into Iran and become Iranians to the east, right? And of course, part of them go westwards, right? That's why it's called Indo-European, because it's a migration that takes place, right? Um, to as far as India on the one hand, right, and as far as the as Western Europe and the British Isles, right, on the other hand, right. These are all these, we will be dealing when you come to deal with your history of Europe, right, quote unquote, and I mean the smaller definition of Europe, right? You will see that they are all, of course, Indo-Europeans, because we saw we have seen that already as far as the languages are concerned, right? So they believe that the first Greeks, right, also came into the Greek peninsula circa 2000 BCE. But for centuries, right, and actually for more than a millennia, right, until around um, 800 BCE, right, where we get the archaic age of Greece, and we will get to that, right? This society had remained fairly simple and static, right? Um, what I'm talking about is the mainland Greek sort of cultural tradition, right? Mycenaeans, obviously, who are also Indo-European, right? We saw that they go from 1450 to 1250, 1100 BCE, right? So anyway, but the Indo-Europeans that migrated into the Greek peninsula itself, right, remained for centuries simple and static, right? This was not the case with Mycenaeans, right? And according to this, right, to this scenario, which connects Mycenae to the mainland Greece, which is obviously the case, right? Prior to 1600 BCE, right, Mycenae, right, there was, the Greek peninsula life didn't change much, right? They were living in Stone Age conditions, right? Until 1600 BCE. I want you to pay attention to this. Stone Age conditions until 1600 BCE. When you're talking about the Greeks themselves, then you're talking about 800. We'll talk about that in the next session. But anyway, circa 1600 BCE, yeah, all of a sudden life changes suddenly, right? We talked about this when we got to the Minoans, right? For centuries, we thought that, the Greeks begin in 700 BCE, and that the poetry of Homer, right, the Iliad and the Odyssey, right, were just that, stories, right? Until in the 19th century, our German scholar and archaeologist and businessman, yeah, not a professional archaeologist, right? Imagine that. Heinrich Schliemann, right, remember, went and discovered Troy, right? And then we figured out that the story of Iliad and Odyssey, in fact, is the connection. It shows the connection of Mycenae, right, and the Mycenaeans, right, to the Ionians, right, and the populations that were living in Western Anatolia, right. We came to realize that there were probably some reality to the Trojan Wars that were depicted in the Iliad of Homer, right? And what is the general story of that war, right? We know that the king of Mycenaean Sparta, i.e., so we are talking about the king of Sparta, who is called Menelaus, right? And his wife Helen, right? Paris of Troy comes and abducts, right, the wife of this king, right? And of course, Agamemnon, right, comes to the aid of the Spartan king, right? Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, right, attacks Troy, and that begins the Trojan Wars, right? And here we have a specimen of the mask of Agamemnon, right, the king of Mycenae, right? But okay, just as Crete and Kenosis had established these connections, right, the Mycenaeans, right, also therefore maintain these connections, right? These are all the Mycenaean cities, and the red ones, Troy, Trianta, and Kenosis, are the cities that are conquered or sacked by the Mycenaeans, right? And it's in the Trojan Wars that there is a major conflict, right? And this is the direction of what you see on the map is the direction of the Mycenaean sort of invasions, right, my friends? Right. So it was Schliemann, right, that discovered many things, right? Of course, you remember Schliemann discovered the Minoan culture also, right? And here he went to Mycenae, and then in 1876 he discovered a circle of graves, right, that were very, very deep, right, and in which there were rectangular shafts, and this was a new form of sort of disposing of the dead, which tells you a lot about your culture, right? That Europeans who are busybodies now in Africa and running all over the place and of course discovering and substantively sort of adding to our knowledge about our past histories, our collective past histories, but with their own bias, of course, right? So these Europeans that are running all over the place in Western Asia, right? Here, one of them is a German businessman, right, who goes on excavations, right, in this part of the world. It doesn't belong to anyone, so he goes and he pleases himself, right? And he becomes a discoverer, right? He discovers a cultural tradition, the Mycenaean cultural tradition, and he notices that they have a peculiar and a burial customs that Europeans have not come across it, and then they realize that these are shaft graves, right? These shaft graves that contain the bodies of men, women, and children, and they are filled with gold jewelry and ornaments and weapons and utensils. You want to know what is incredible about the whole thing? Is that there is no gold or silver or metals to be found in Mycenae itself, right? So all of this wealth, right, was accumulated because of the Mycenaean connection with the peoples and cultures of Africa and Western Asia, right? And of course, the people who were in these shaft graves having all these gold jewelries and whatnot, right? They had acquired wealth and authority and the capacity to mobilize human labor. So this is one of the shaft graves, grave circle A, right, in Mycenae, right? You see that it's circular, right, and it is deep, right, and it has rectangular graves within it, right? This is the graves circle A, right, and this is a part of the shaft grave, I believe. It is, yeah, a different angle maybe of the same shaft grave, right? So what do they find in them? Yeah, a Minoan Mycenaean gold cup, right? What is the symbolism on it? Right, the bull, right, the taming of the bull. They find a gold ring again from shaft grave 4, right? And here you see Mycenaean fighters fighting, warriors fighting. Now, Mycenaeans became, as we will see, great naval sort of maritime sort of people, right? But they were also aggressive, right? They did trade, peaceful trade, but they also did piracy, right? And here are another example of the fantastic gold that was found in these shaft graves, right? And so subsequent excavations, a large palace complex, massive walls, more graves, and other evidence of a rich and technologically advanced civilizations, right? That lasted for this period from 1600, 1550. You see, they give you different dates, right? Okay. So, despite the power of the legends about the power of Minos of Crete, there is no archaeological evidence of Cretan political control over mainland Greece. But the Cretans, who had absorbed all the cultural traditions of Western Asia to begin with, exerted a powerful cultural influence on the Greek mainland. So this is your typical sort of example of quote unquote a Mycenaean quote unquote city, right? So you see what you have a central palace complex, right, that houses the king and the immediate family of the king, the royal family and whatnot. Around it you have houses, residences, right? And the shaft grave, you see where it is located. I want you to pay attention to this lion's gate, right? And I will show you a picture of it, right? These are the guard houses, these are the artistic quarters, cistern, another gate, right? So this is a typical um, example of a Mycenaean sort of fortress city, if you will. And whether they are in Attica or they are in Pylos in Peloponnesia, right, or in Mycenae itself in Peloponnesia, right, they bear the same structure, the same sort of cultural setup, right? And this is again another reconstruction of it, right? Okay, so the Mycenaeans borrowed whatever the Minoans had, right? The idea of the palace, centralized economy, administrative bureaucracy, which they themselves had gotten from Western in Asia, as well as the Minoan writing system, right? Yeah, whereas Minoans had linear A, the Mycenaeans had linear B, right? The techniques of architecture, pottery were the same, and right, and so on and so forth. How did they accumulate their wealth of power? Right, profits from trade and piracy, right? And this civilization is called Mycenaean only because, incidentally, it was Mycenia that was the first site that was excavated. So from trade and piracy is where the Mycenaeans got their wealth, right? And of course, Mycenaean citadels, right? Or like later on, Greek cities are also like this. They are built at a commanding location on a hilltop, surrounded by a high, thick fortification wall that is made of stones, right? And they're so high, and the stones are so massive, so to speak. Nothing compared to the pyramids of the Egyptians, or the I don't think even to the ziggurats, right? Or the Hittite constructions, but nevertheless, right, fortresses built on commanding locations, thick walls made of stone, so much so that later Greeks believed that the Cyclops, one-eyed Cyclops of legend, had lifted these stones into their place. And warlike people, right, they need fortified enclosures, right, in times of danger, right? I mean, okay, you can see my bias here. uh, Please do read through it, yeah, my friends. Yeah. Okay, this is a reconstruction of a Mycenaean citadel, and this is the Lion's Gate. Remember, I told you that we will see a Lion's Gate um, very soon. Okay, this is the Lion's Gate of Mycenia itself, right? Um, and yeah, I mean, I think humans are yay big. Yeah, my friends. So these are rather, yeah, important sort of structural or setups, right? Um, okay, so the palaces were just like the Minoans, administrative complexes, right? They were surrounded by courtyards, living quarters of the royal family, and the scene that I described for you before, right? So in the shaft graves, right, there was the tomb of rulers and the leading families, and then later on, right, grand beehive-shaped structures were made of stone and covered with a mound of earth, right? Okay, we described Mycenaean city, the city of a typical Mycenaean city for you, right? And we know that whereas the Minoan script was not deciphered, right, as in the Physus disc, right, linear B was deciphered and uses pictorial signs to represent syllables, right? But we can tell that is an early form of Greek, right? And the extensive palace bureaucracy kept track of people, animals, and objects, right? And exercised a high degree of control over the economy of the kingdom, right? Okay. So linear B, right, Mycenaean writing was used for bureaucracy rather than literature, right? Which we will get when we get to ancient Greece, right? These are some specimen of the linear tablets, my friends, right? And we have talked about them enough, and we have talked about Mycenaean sort of bureaucracy, right? But one of the main functions of the government was to, of course, feed its population, coordinate grain production, right, and control the wool industry from raw material to finish, right? Scribes keep track of flocks, the allocation of raw wool to spinners and weavers, and the production, storage, and distribution of cloth articles, right? Um, okay. Um, okay. The evidence for a broad political organization of Greece in this period is contradictory, right? Um, we know that Agamemnon, the king of Mycenae, leads an expedition of Greeks, right, who are coming from different regions, and they fight against the city of Troy, right? Um, okay, so these are specimen of Mycenaean pottery, my friends, right? Um, okay. So now trade, as far as trade is concerned, right? Um, there are there are strong indications that there were independent centers of trade, Mycenae, Pylos, and elsewhere, right? Seafaring skills of Minoans and Mycenaeans, right? As well as, remember, hello, right? As well as the Phoenicians, remember, my friends? Our friends, the Phoenicians, right? Uh, their seafaring skills, yeah, there was this exchange, if you will, of technologies, of shipbuilding, of seafaring, and and the coastal lines of the Peloponnesian part of Greece, and mainland Greece, right, provides a lot of good harbors, for instance, as well as in Crete, right, for commercial weapons to vessels to come and go, and they primarily sort of sailed on wind and sail, right? The sailors uh, sailed in daylight hours and kept to the land, and kept the land in sight, right? Yeah. So this is circa 1250 BCE, right, my friends? This is the extent of this is Mycenaean Greece, right, with its Mycenaean cities dotted in black, right, and that's the battle scene, right, and this is the directions in which they traded, and from which they imported most of the material that they needed, right? Because, as we will see, like Crete, like the Peloponnesian um, parts, and like the Greek mainland Greece itself, we are not here dealing with self-sufficient societies by any means. Yeah. So let's proceed further, right? So Mycenaean ships, in fact, became a very sort of a good technological source, a source of technology, right, for transportation. They were light. They didn't have. Um, they had little storage area, right? So the people that were rowing in them, right, the crew had to go ashore to eat and sleep, right? and the ships, because they were low keels, we will see they could run up to the beach, right? And so on and so forth. One of the productions of the Cretans and the Mycenaean Greeks that were distributed uh, everywhere that they went, and from where we know that they came and they traded here, is their pottery, of course, right, my friends? And this is a specimen of Mycenaeans ships. You see it sails with the wind, right? And you see that it has a multitude of rowers sort of conducting the ship. This is another specimen of it with a Roman here depicted. Yeah. Um, so, and here are examples of your Mycenaean soldiers. Right? Uh, okay. Um, so your book says that Cretan merchants pioneered trade routes. Um, I suspect this also shows a kind of bias, my friends, right? Because you remember we were talking about Phoenicians beforehand, right? At any rate, but they had extensive trade connections, right? They followed, in fact, right, the Minoan trade routes. Now, and they imported, right, almost the same things, right? They exported, right, pottery, oil, metal work, that the metal they had gotten from elsewhere, and they worked it and they sold it elsewhere, right? And clothes, right? They imported most everything. We get to the Mycenaeans, and we will see um, um, about about it. But Egypt basically was the granary, right? Silver and gold, um, ivory and gold, right? So grain here, as it was in yonder years, yeah, timber, probably, right? So, okay. So the Mycenaean trade routes followed the Minoan trade routes, right? What did the Mycenaeans uh, import? Amber, which is translucent yellow brownish sort of stone for jewelry. Ivory carved in Syria, right? Um, they needed metals, the gold prized by the ruler, but also copper and tin in order to make bronze, right? And so on and so forth. Mycenaeans, in fact, as I told you, were aggressive traders, right? So um, their trade routes reach as far as Sicily, right, and beyond, and to Egypt and to the Nile. But we had seen how the Phoenicians had, in fact, gone this way and this way, right, as well. Okay, my friends, so nothing comes out of this, into this world, out of the blues. Okay. Um, okay. As I told you, trade and piracy were closely linked, right? The Mycenaeans traded with those who were strong and took from those who were weak, right? They came into conflict with the Hittite kings of Anatolia in the 14th and 13th centuries BCE. like 1300s and 1200s BCE, right? The height of Hittite power, right? Documents found in Hattusha, yeah, the Hittite capital, refers to the king of the land of Ahijawa, right? Which is probably the Hittite rendering of Achaeans, right? And the term used by Homer to refer to the Greeks, right? Achaeans, right? Um, okay, relations between the Hittites and the Achaeans were sometimes friendly, sometimes strained, right? So now look, my friends, how smart you are, right? How smart you have become. Circa 1300, you see the world, you see the international scene, right? And you know all these people. You know the Hittites, right? You know the Assyrians, you know the Kassites, you know the Elamites, well, you don't know, but you've heard of them, right? You know about the Mitanni, right? The Mitanni. You know about the new kingdom of Egypt, right? You know about Mycenaean Greece, right? And of course, you knew about Knossos, right? You know about Egypt. Um, you have come to know the international scene. You have been reading, right, about China and the subcontinent and the Americas on your own, my friends. And now you know the international scene. You see that the cosmopolitan nature of the societies that have emerged in Africa and in Asia, right, for the most part. And later, these societies influence what we are terming as the beginnings of Europe. Of course, the beginnings of Europe is somewhere here as far as some people are concerned, right? But yes, you see, yeah, I mean, this is Western Asia for you, and this is the beginning of Europe. The Aegean Sea ostensibly separating it. But we know that seas do not separate, seas connect, my friends, right? Okay, moving on, right? And then we come in around circa 1200 BCE, right? The Hittites are having difficulties with the uh, um, uh, Ahijava, right, with their attacks on Troy and whatnot. But all of this is foreshadowing what is coming in 1200 BCE. We do not know. This is the beginnings, right? After this begins the Iron Age, my friends, right? We are very close to the beginning of the first millennium, right? We were in the second millennium, but as soon as we get to 999, right, we get to the first millennium, right, which is shortly after this. Around 1200 BCE, when the Iron Age begins, right, there is yet another sort of another sort of upheaval, right, in the world that we are examining, right, and that is the migration and movements of people and tides of refugees, right, going from one region of the world into the another region of the world, right? And we have the invasions and the migrations of 1200 BCE, yeah, unidentified invaders come and destroy the capital of the Hittite kingdom, right? Ramses the third has to deal with the invasions of the sea people in Palestine, right? The Philistines were able to occupy the coast of Palestine, right? And this is the world as it looked like, right? Circa 1200 BCE, right? You see the invasions, right? Inland invasions of sea people, right? Of Knossos, of Mycenae, um, of of Troy, of Hattusha, right? Um, Destruction of Ugarit, it's itself a major city. Canaan, which we have not dealt with, right, have been impacted. The sea people in the Nile Delta, and so on and so forth. Right? Excuse me, I am a little bit tired, my friends, at the moment. That explains a little bit my, yeah, faux pas, yeah? Uh, Please excuse me. Okay, so then 1200 BCE, these invasions, right? What is the result of these invasions, right? Egypt had lost control of Syria and Palestine. The Egyptians lost their foothold in Nubia, and later on in Nubia, the Nubian civilization again resurfaces, right? Um, Among the invaders, right, were Ekwesh, who could be Achaeans, that is the Greeks, right? So the Mycenaean culture collapses, right, as had the Minoan culture, right? Um, and there is no more writing to be found from them, no more palaces, right, and so on and so forth. um, there was depopulation of some regions in Palestine, in Greece, right, and inflow of people to other regions. One thing that continued, of course, was the Greek language. Another thing that was continued was the Greek gods, right, and of course technological um, skills are never really lost, right? But they witness a decline, right? So here again, you have the invasions of the sea people, right? And here you have the um, again the migrations and whatnot. When you are listening to this video, which has become very long, my friends, and I hope that you listen to it in portions, my friend, right? uh, Stop here. I mean, stop many places, but stop here and watch and look at the map again, right? And then the whole region, thereby at 1200, right, begins the dark ages of uh, of for um, for the Greeks and other societies, right? So, um, well, that's it. You'll be happy to know your video is finished. This one. Okay, bye, my friends.